In late September of this year, this council directed me and staff to investigate alternative waste handling methods, as we all know that we are facing an oncoming crisis with solid waste in Oconee County and the remainder of this state. In doing so, we took a several approach to evaluating what our different options are, what the cost is, what the topographical and geographical requirements would be, and what our chances of getting permitted would be through DHEC, through demonstration of need processes. As you know, Oconee County is comprised of 648 square miles, and of those square miles, we do have one C&D landfill located in Seneca near a closed-out MSW, which means Municipal Solid Waste Landfill, in Seneca. That landfill was closed in 1998, capped, and is only used for C&D and LCD now. The remainder of our waste, approximately 45,000 tons per year, is either recycled through our 11 staffed van convenience centers or taken to the transfer station, which is located across the street from the C&D facility on Wells Highway in Seneca. The purpose of the transfer station that we currently operate and have operated since the first day of the landfill closing is to transfer waste from the man convenience centers, municipalities, business and industries, and townships into a building, in which case we compact that waste, load it into a different truck, and it is then driven to a landfill in Homer, Georgia, owned and operated by Waste Management. We currently have a contract with Waste Management for the transportation of our waste. That contract expires in 2023 and increases primarily based on the CPI. That increase is capped. However, Waste Management's ability to cancel this contract at any time is not. So we handle approximately 45,000 tons per year of MSW. All of this is processed through our solid waste complex on Wells Highway. While we do make every effort to recycle plastics, glass, aluminum, steel, cardboard, paper, mixed paper, eyeglasses, hearing aids, used oil, etc., we are still facing an enormous amount of tons per year in waste. A part of our evaluation here has been to thoroughly look into the types of waste processing that Oconee County may be capable of doing over the next 5 to 10 years. There are a couple of things at the end of this presentation that I will request of this council, one of which would be a motion for us to take step 1. Second one would be a motion for us to take step 2, as if we don't do something now, and I went back through the minutes, this is something that Mr. McCall and this council, and past councils actually, credit where credit's due, has discussed as a primary goal every year for the past 10 years. It is time we do something. Oh, I have the clicker? I like the clicker. Okay, so let's see, I think I've already said all this verbally. Right now we are permitted at 300 tons per day. If you applied that to 7 days a week, it would be approximately 190,000 tons per year. Our growth over the past 5 years has resulted in our tonnage increasing about 4,500 tons per every 3-year period. In this process, we reviewed incineration, conversion, and other handling methods as a means to evaluate our best options for now and the future of our solid waste disposal. Can I stand up? I'm feeling pushing over here. So I've just done this so much, I practiced at home, I feel like I should. So the first thing that we looked at here were mass incineration, which is the use of controlled flame to combust or thermally break down unsorted, which means anything and everything. There is no sorting process required here. For producing a residue that will contain little or no combustible materials in the end. This would mean an ash compost. This ash still must be transferred to another waste facility or a lined landfill that is permitted for allowing MSW waste even after the incineration process is completed. The second item we looked at was pyrolysis. It's where the process is essentially like an organic mulching of materials. It's put into a kiln, and the absence of oxygen does produce char, tar, oil, and gas. Of this waste, the remainder, the percent left, would still have to be taken to a landfill. We also looked at different types of handling. We looked at Class 3 processing, glass crushing, and transfer stations. I don't know if I can flip this. Is that too loud with the paper, Katie? Gasification was the third option we looked at, and the gasification is just the elimination of oxygen that causes to mass biodegrade and break down. Y'all have a lengthy report in front of you. I should have kind of introduced that at first. You do have this lengthy report in front of you, but after the chapter of each one, the PowerPoints are embedded behind each of the options there. If you want to flip to the PowerPoint pages and just go through the bullet points with us, we can look at that as well. There are advantages and oh, I have the clicker. Mass incineration. Mass incineration is essentially putting something into what can be a kiln. With the combination of the waste that we have, putting something in the mass incineration unit may be one of our best options. In the event that the crisis of 2018 that hit China hits us, we wouldn't be stuck with, Swain, how many tons are we sitting on today of plastic that we can't sell?
Well, right now we've got, maybe 10 ton back there.
Okay, that's not too bad. A few weeks ago, we were hitting close to 100 tons. When the recycling market takes a dive or fluctuates as badly as it has over the past couple of years, while our internal efforts to recycle are here and our processing is still the same, if we are unable to locate a buyer for our recycling commodities, then we haven't recycled them at all. We've stored them in a warehouse. And by storing them, that plastic composition breaks down over time. And believe it or not, makes the plastic less valuable, even though they're breaking it down at a facility when they start recycling it. Mass incineration does have some pros that make it attractive for Oconee County in some ways. One is it doesn't require any sort of pre-processing, so it would be essentially the same thing as the transfer station. You bring the load, you dump, you do not discriminate, you burn it all. It does have electricity. It could produce some energy, but I don't know that we need to look into waste to energy yet. I think that technology is a little bit far ahead for us right now. We do know that mass incineration is a tested and viable technology. It's one of the oldest waste alternative options outside of landfilling that there is in the United States. The familiar of the technology used in mass incineration is something that I think that we could sell to our public in a different way. Waste to energy, there are so many things, so many components that have yet to work, feeding into a system. Waste to energy is 10 times more expensive than mass incineration, first and foremost. It would mean the process of us collecting waste and utilizing the equipment that we already have would be absolutely obsolete, though. We would have to start with ground zero from scratch, but training a public would be the easier side of this. The cons to this are obvious. Cons to solid waste, period. I should just say this up front. Solid waste is expensive. It's very expensive. Whatever method we look at is going to be expensive. The cons are the high capital cost. It costs a lot of money up front to build one. They operate for about 15 or 20 years. They have significant operational costs because of the amount of manpower that it takes, and these are very, very rarely belt-fed. The permitting process for these is difficult, but not as difficult as some of the other options we looked at. And it does have significant air pollution control requirements, which means there's a series of scrubbers or filters that you could put in. So if you burnt, say, a rotten egg, you would not be able to smell it if you put in the appropriate filters and scrubbers. The second item here, that we looked at was pyrolysis. It is a material that is decomposed in a kiln-like atmosphere. It is in the absence of oxygen. It is also very, very costly, and I do not believe would be a good option for Oconee County. First of all, the land requirement for this would be incredible. The closest one to us is in Sevier County, Tennessee. I'd actually kind of Googled a while back, why don't you see a recycling container at Dollywood? And I got this crazy answer. So they don't sort either. They take every piece of waste they have and they throw it in these big giant buildings and they heat it up and they take all the air out, and then they push it through these tubes, and out comes what appears to be compost until you pick it up. It has got broken glass, broken metal, nails. They do have equipment where they can use magnets to take certain metals out, but non-ferrous metals such as aluminum cans won't come out, and the glass doesn't go through the sifters very well, because as this material composts, it creates the glass to be wet on the outside. You know how sometimes when a glass sweats and things stick to it, and it doesn't fit through their filtering process. Their annual operating cost for the Sevierville, Tennessee, and this was outside of construction cost of almost $25 million for the first phase, and it's a 4-phase project. Their annual operating cost was right at $95 million for a 3-year period, so I did not think that was a good option for Oconee County. Let's see. I'm clicking. Here we go. And our gasification process. This is the one where it resembles that of pyrolysis, but the primary difference is that the technologies biodegrade only portions of the MSW. In addition to the plastics that it accepts, it takes the presence of oxygen, which takes a longer period of time, and it has to have a heater and like a tumbler on the inside for this to create a compost type material. Again, I do not feel like these would be a good fit for Oconee County because of the upfront cost, one, because the operating cost, two, and because of the fact that this really does not address managing waste, because in the end, if there's a 15 to 17% contamination rate, the load is entirely unusable according to the EPA, and that is not a state standard, it's a federal standard, which means we would have to landfill everything that we had processed for whatever period of time that that testing was for. Am I going too fast, too slow? Okay. When we started looking at other options, it's like this, there we go. We looked at conversion technologies. Conversion technology is a broad range of technologies used to convert solid waste into other useful products, chemicals, and/or fuels. Composting is where obviously a macro or microorganism facilitates the biodegradation of organic materials. I will go ahead and tell you that, as boring as this sounds, it's pretty interesting because of the scientific methods that this process goes through. And actually, you can go online and look at these things in stages. You can take a plastic Solo cup that is a plastic Solo cup on day 1, looks like a plastic Solo cup on day 16, and on day 24, you're like, what is that? But it's still a plastic Solo cup, so it happens pretty quickly. But I don't think any of these are the best fit for Oconee County because these are very similar to the mass technologies that we had looked at with the decompositions. With the decomposition, we're not talking about getting rid of waste or having a management of our waste. We're literally talking about making waste of one sort into turning waste into another sort. We still have waste. If we're not going to take out what is recyclable, if we're not going to take into account what should be pulled out before we put it through this process in the first place, we're going to end up with more waste. It may be composted waste, but it is going to end up being more waste. There are some pros and cons. For the in-vessel composting, normally these are in the large buildings, so there's very little outside influence for these. The pros are that the technology is proven. The other pro is it does have low energy consumption. It is a viable product in the end, and it has an up to 60% waste reduction rate. The cons are obviously your potential odors. It only processes organic items. This is leaving the greatest percentage of the type of waste that we manage up to unprocessed or unmanaged. So essentially, if we're going to spend $500 million, we would want to handle all of our waste, not half of our waste. The other con to this is that the pre-processing required would require our current transfer station and solid waste footprint to be almost triple what it is for us to have the sorting that would be necessary for this to be possible. Another technology here, perfect. Our handling technologies. These are actually where we just take the waste and process it inside or outside of a facility, but each of those are in our control. The first one is a class 3 processing. It's the sorting of viable recyclables from incoming waste stream, known as mixed waste, or Wayne and I both know this as dirty MRFs. This is where we bring in all the materials from one location, sorted or unsorted, so we wouldn't have to do a whole bunch of educational training for the public, and pick the commodities that were greatest in need at the market at the time. Say that steel was selling like crazy. We could actually put in a ferrous belt and it would pick up organically whatever was ferrous or was predominantly steel in that. If certain types of plastic were hot on the commodities market, and we knew that we could make the money that month according to Yellow Sheet Recyclables, we could actually use this process to pick out whatever was working at the moment in the market. The downside to this is that it is very, very manpower heavy. The other option that we would need if we considered a Class 3 would possibly be a transfer station, which is essentially what we're operating under right this minute. But the transfer station would be utilized for only the waste that could not be processed at the facility itself. So DHEC does have a lot of say-so in how these things are owned, operated, managed, and placed in South Carolina. Demonstration of needs, which are used for most anything else, requires that there be no Class 3 landfill or operating facility within 75 miles of another. We happen to be in luck. Because the closing of the Pendleton Transfer Station in the past year, 6 months, we've seen a significant increase in waste coming in, which has given us a little bit of oomph in our demonstration of need, that we actually need to start looking at some permitting processing in the future for either expanding what we have currently or looking at an alternative method for handling our waste in the future. I'm not clicking very well. Are y'all paying attention to this? Because I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here we go. So the Class 3 processing methods would be, the pros for us would be that it would target recyclable rich loads, saying that we could hand pick or cherry pick out any part of the commodity that we knew that was good on the market at the time. It adds to the front end of an existing municipal solid waste handling. Essentially, all it does is give you every single available option. What we have right now are no options. What we have right now, no choice. We either work the way we work or we don't work at all. And when one thing goes wrong, it can shut the whole system down. If we had something like this in place, one leg of the table would only be that, one leg. The other three could hold up the table while the rest of it was operating. Technology and workforce recovery control means that we could have a batch of skilled and unskilled labor, that this would be a place for possible job creation in the future. And some cons of this are the capital and operating cost, the workforce, again, and the large portion of the waste that's processed in this should go straight to the landfill. The recycling quality and quantity is completely controlled by man and not by machine in most cases. Mr. McCall, you and I talked about the machine-operated one in Horry County, and I really want to go see that one. There are only 4, I believe, that work on the vacuum system that you talked about. We talked about the suctioning of the bags and the filming out. We could not find anything other than the model in Horry County that showed that one exceptionally well. The other thing, and I'm just going to keep phasing in the other things that we've seen here. Here we go. Is glass crushing. Currently, we bunker and hold glass until we get a certain minimum amount of tons, or until the glass company needs more tons, and then they call us and we load and we ship them to Strategic Materials in College Park, Georgia. We do get $20 a ton for clear. Am I making this up? $12 a ton for brown. I'm getting better. And $5 a ton for green, 7 ton? 6. Right in the middle. While we are making considerable money as compared to some other areas, we're not recycling everything that we can. We're not utilizing the glass for what it could be utilized for here in Oconee County. We have discussed this in the past, the glass crushing facility. And actually, Mr. McCall, if you don't mind, I want to pass around some of your pulverized glass here. So I got some glass a while back from Horry County, but mine was an aggregate style, but this is a lot smaller since they've got some newer equipment. If y'all want to pass that around and handle it. That's actually just pulverized glass. Horry County currently processes about 2,800 tons per year. They make a profit outside of the original capital cost of about $275,000 for the machinery and additional $25,000 for an optional part that allows you to change the types of crushing and sorting that goes through. They're bringing in about $64,000 per year in material revenues.
How much was the capital cost again?
275, well, 300 with the option that they have with it.
And they're bringing in 60,000 a year.
They brought in 62,000 their first year.
Thank you.
That seems like a no-brainer, right? The interesting thing there is that we're bringing in almost 40% more glass than them. And while we are shipping it off and doing things with it, I really think that we can sell this in Oconee County for construction cost. Just a few minutes earlier in Mr. Kane's committee meeting, you saw a detention wall, retaining wall being built. It's perfectly suitable for all kinds of things that we have not explored. Off the record, I have asked asphalt companies if they would be interested in testing some out. Obviously, we can't test a small amount, but I think a field trip to Orion County to bring back a truck full might be in our near future. So with these processes here, after we looked at everything, if you want to go back to your very last 2 pages in your report here, the first one has a chart on it that looks similar to this. I'm so sorry, Kenny, I don't put this stuff in. But if you can pull up the PDF, it's the last 2 pages. Actually, I think it's 5 pages. This is your cost analysis. This is where everybody pays attention. Everybody cares about the money part. Everybody cares about the recycling, but it does cost money to do things. It does cost a lot of money to do things in some instances. So as we look through this, the cost analysis per ton is one thing, but cost analysis over a 20-year period of operating it is another. On the first page here, if you look at the cost analysis, the mass burn appears to be the most expensive over the period of time for capital cost. But if you'll flip that same page and look at your 20-year landfill cost on that second page for the cost analysis, you'll see that the landfill cost over a period of time cost more. I think something here that we haven't discussed is the cost of not giving ourselves options. The cost of being backed in a corner. The cost of not being able to recycle when it's time for us to pick the commodity, or when it's time to say, okay, it's not really worth it at this time despite our greatest efforts. The cost is that we, regardless of what we pay, right now have no choice. The city of Greenville was notified approximately 74 hours in advance of their waste management handling company completely pulling out on them. It is a similar company to the one we have a contract with, and I'm not threatening anyone in any way, but when I read that in the newspaper, it really occurred to me what a crisis we could have on our hands if we had no say-so. So I know this is a ton of material, but I know you've all talked about it. Mr. McCall, I know you know most of this by the back of your hand. Mr. Davis, you've looked into incineration. Mr. Kane, I believe you and I had a discussion about it last week. Mr. Elliott, you and I made a presentation on it a couple weeks ago about it. And Mr. Hart, I know you and I have talked about it when we talked about Fort Bass Convenience Center. We've talked about it a lot. It's time we do something. I'm going to ask that you take your time and read all of this before we go jump into a 25-foot pool. But I really would like for y'all to consider to give us, me, and staff, the option to look in the viability of purchasing a glass crushing plant in the next year's budget and potentially looking into the operational cost of a dirty MRF with the idea that we would implement incineration in the future, and I mean 5 to 7 years. I don't mean 2 years. I realize that's a lot to ask up front. If y'all wouldn't mind, I'd like for y'all to take this home. If you have questions after reading through what we looked at, Google on your own, look up things on your own. Don't trust what I'm telling you. I think that we have the option to pick a piece here and a piece there. I don't think we should go with one thing. I don't think there is one thing that's going to work for us. But I think a combination of things over a period of time so that we give ourselves options to do things instead of having no options would be the best thing for this county.
Ms. Brock, I think we need to start a conversation with our neighboring counties because we're going to have partners in this. And maybe we have the site location in Oconee County, but we're going to need capital investment from other counties to help us with this.
We will.
And everybody, I mean, Mr. McCall's pointing out Pickens is in a pickle right now. They're saying Greenville at some point was in a pickle. Everybody's going to be in a pickle. before long in the upstate of South Carolina. We need to be the leader on this and pull other counties in and start that conversation about how do we gonna address this together so it's cost effective for the counties involved.
Absolutely. There's a potential for a public-private partnership. You look at some of the larger solid waste facilities in South Carolina, they're not owned and operated by a county. They're owned and operated by a solid waste authority, much like our sewer authority here. Multi-county, multi-regional, and they're operated by an authority. And it's that same authority that gives them the benefit of having the financial backing of the areas in which they represent.
Mr. Elliott is right. If we sit back, keep talking about it, and we ain't gonna do nothing, and another county comes in, and what'd you say, there's a mileage differential between if somebody else beats us to the punch,
Yes, sir, 7
then
mile radius.
we're on the outside. So we could either be proactive now, or we could pay another county for our problems and let them make the money. And this is it's nothing to, keep kicking down the road and say, oh, we're gonna do it later on, And what you said about Horry County, according to Wayne called me from Horry County right before I come over here, and I said, how much he told me, he is losing 15%, so he's already at the goal of 85%. And I said, what do you do with the furniture? He said, we grinding it, magnetic belt separation, sell it to people that need to burn wood for steam. Because he said, in Horry County, they ain't got but 20 foot, they can dig down, they gotta stay 2 foot above the water table.
That's true.
So, we gotta do something, man. It's gonna be expensive, but it's gonna be expensive now, or we gonna get a phone call, guess what, Waste Management just shut us off. Then what we gonna do? The commode done backed up. Pickens County, the commode backed up 2 times, first with the C&D and now with their landfill. Charleston County, same thing. Old Bees Ferry Road gonna be there forever. Now, Charleston County slipping it up to Georgetown at $40 a ton. In Georgetown, now we're saying, we gonna run out of room
Already.
already.
In the recent purchase of Twin Chimneys, but in Greenville County and Greenville City, there was another purchase and an expansion for permitting there. They estimated their lifetime to be 7 to 14 years there on the original permit. Now, they've gone up since then, but originally, their permit requirement was less than half of what they actually needed. Now, lucky for us, we're permitted 300 tons per day right now. There are times when we get close to that mark, 280-ish. There are times we don't get as close.
But there's no sense keep throwing the stuff out when we could be selling
Right,
stuff.
right.
It's like Mr. Elliott told me on the phone the other day. He says, well, if you ain't getting but nothing for it, give it away. We ain't paying to bury it. He hit the nail on the head. So we got avenues, and we need to go ahead and say, if you, Madam Administrator, you say we need to do something now, we need to do it. We don't keep we gotta talk about it. We gotta do it.
And obviously, these things would have to be presented again and approved in the budgeting process, but if y'all give me that direction, I'd be happy to start including that and getting some firmer numbers and looking to actual permitting costs, location sites. There's a lot of work that'll go into this. Permitting alone could be 3 to 5 years, depending on what the process we select is. In the same time that's happening, I can go out and reach out to other counties, potentially other investors. Would this county be interested at some point in talking about us having a solid waste authority and creating that again? You know, years ago, we did the Tri-County landfill. Anybody's been here a long time, remind me of how that went. Bad? Was it bad? I think it was bad.
It was bad.
It was bad. So I don't know if we need to make 100% government partnership, and please forgive me when I say this, but it's awfully hard to make an agreement that lasts longer than those who signed it when they were in an elected seat.
I kind of see this project a little differently than somebody telling us we can't bury it. My opinion is burying it's not the right way for the environment long-term. So there's a lot of different ways. Abbeville's begging us to bring our trash down there. Greenville's begging us to bring their trash there. My personal opinion, that's not the best thing for the environment long-term. So in the studies that I've looked at with all the incineration plants, I mean, I think everybody that's born 80 and above can remember either their, more than likely, their grandparents burning trash. That's not the type of incineration that we're talking about. But I believe in the way that the plants are, the actual separation of, number one, that takes the metals out through magnetic, which is very simple, and removes those, and those get ground up and sold for a multitude of different things or recycled. And it separates out from what I have seen from aluminum to steel and everything from there, from the end product that can be sold for asphalt and different opportunities like that, which is really, really good. To me, the incineration is the way to go. So I'd like to see some actual prices on something like that, and how much area is needed. Is it 25, 30 acres? Is it
60.
40 acres, 60 acres? The glass is done separately. To me, everything I've looked at on the glass is between 250 to 400,000. I'm in favor of moving forward with that, period, because if we go ahead and get the jump on that, I think we're gonna be fine. There's a multitude of processing. To me, I know we talked about, was it selling for ship stuff? To me, there's so many other ways to purchase glass up here that we don't have to worry about that. I think that was just a idea that was brought forth on sandblasting, because sandblasting locally happens all the time too. So I thought that was very good. Mr. McCall kind of brought that up about the paint and everything. So the glass crushing is a separate plant in itself from what I've understood.
Yes.
From the incineration, and the air quality test that comes off of there. If you look at all of our industry, they have to maintain a certain air quality as well. So actually, the air quality coming off incineration is actually held, unfortunately, a little bit higher than what comes off of industry. So we would actually, the air coming off of an incineration plant would actually be cleaner than what's coming off of industry. Not that there's an issue with what's coming off of, but that's what the DHEC regulates right now.
The less you're gonna incinerate, the better off you're gonna be. It all sounds real rosy, like sunshine and lollipops. You start with a scrubber. All right, you got it, first off, your first stage is electrostatic. Works real good. You put a static charge on the molecules or the particles, they're attracted to the grid and cleaned off. Electrostatic scrubbers are notorious for breaking down usually on weekends. That's when they like to go down.
Holidays?
Yeah, and the dust coming off of them is a pain in the neck to deal with, because it's considered almost as bad as radioactive. Then when you burn the stuff, you got the sun gas coming off. All right. So you take the gas. We gonna burn it through a catalytic converter. Now remember, we're making a chain here, and the chain has got electrostatic scrubber, which is waiting for the weekend. Then we're going to go to a catalytic converter. Now, the catalytic converter is going to break the gas off. We're going to end up with hydrogen. We're going to end up with carbon monoxide, which your hemoglobin in your body likes that, but it will kill you. And we're going to end up with various other gases coming off that are viable that we can use if we got the ways of compressing it and using it. The trouble is, the electrostatic scrubber, if he goes bad, he's going to plug the catalytic converter up. Then you got to reverse scrub it. I was involved in cleaning catalytic converters with a project with Westvaco, and it turns into a nightmare. So the least you burn, the better off you are.
That would be ideal, Mr. McCall. That's where the Dirty Murph comes in. The burning would be an option for anything that you couldn't recycle or just wasn't feasible to recycle at the time. That's why I said I really don't think that one approach would work. I don't know that we're ready to just pigeonhole ourselves and say, okay, we're gonna do this one thing. I mean, we're doing one thing now.
But I think your Dirty Murph is gonna work, because in that, you're gonna take a lot of stuff out. to start with. You're gonna
Correct.
reduce your intake. Another thing, you go to convenience center, how many people you have hit the bag, hit the dumpster? It's got glass in that bag.
Oh, yeah.
So we're not getting, we're sending, and glass is heavy, so we send it to Georgia to bury it. So the Dirty Murph use optical sorting, and Horry County uses, community service. They got plenty of drunks over there, but they
That could be what's in some of the bags here, sir.
yeah, but we can take the stuff, when the Dirty Murph comes, you're picking the stuff out, you're picking cardboard paper out.
Yes.
The stream is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So whether at the end of the stream, whether we decide to burn it or do something else down the road, like you said further, it's gonna work.
We're gonna have to do this a little slowly. I mean, we're talking about adding staff, adding equipment, permitting, site location, retraining of anybody who's been here any length of time, because we've done it the same way for so long. We can almost do it the same way for so long in our sleep, you know?
I'd like to make a motion to direct the administrator to receive pricing for a glass crusher unit.
Yes, sir.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? I'd also like to make a motion to go into some, I guess, direct you, our administrator, to talk a little bit more on incineration technologies and contact some of those that build those plants so they can actually bring pros and cons back to what the plants are, what the actual cost of the plant is, and what an implementation idea would look like even with the Dirty Murph. Is that clear enough, Mr. Rick? Wait, incineration unit with Dirty Murph involved? Is that clear?
To me, Ms.
Why
Brown.
don't we look at what Horry
I'm clear.
County's doing, because they done got the wheel invented already.
Well, that'd be,
Please.
I'm clear.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
That's a motion.
I second the motion.
Any discussion? You had Horry County in there. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair and Madam Administrator, one of the things that I was just chatting with Mr. Still during the break was about the pay-as-you-throw thing that also could be utilized along with any of these. Because if the less we have to sort, the better. The less manpower we have to use, and at the point, the consumer point, rather than having to deal with it at the landfill, that's just cost savings for us. So, that's another thing. Glass is very heavy. So maybe we can at least convince people to start recycling glass, considering we're looking at a pulverizer, as well as this, I can't remember what it's called, incineration, Dirty Murph.
Incinerator?
Yeah. So we've talked about the pay-as-you-throw. I know somebody in our audience doesn't like it. He's wildly gesturing.
It might be wiser not to do that on an election year.
What's that? Well, I'm just asking
We have
for
looked
some
at it in the
research.
past, and that was a joke.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm not, I mean.
And actually, maybe it's something we could just incentivize rather than penalize.
Okay.
And I also
You
would
want me
like
to
to
look
say
into
that
that?
we just, if we're gonna do the glass pulverizer, which I agree with, we should advertise that on the radio, in the papers, as much as we can to encourage people.
Yes,
Go to the school system.
yes.
The reason why I recycle is because my kids came up with the idea, Daddy, we gotta recycle.
We went on a guilt trip.
So, there are ways to encourage people to do that without making them
Yes, sir.
pay.
Yes, sir. And one of the things we need to look at, and this is something I failed to mention earlier, and I'm not throwing any municipality or any one city under the bus, but until we actually look at how we handle this municipal waste coming from the cities, because at this time we make no requirements, there are no fees associated with them using our solid waste facilities at landfill or otherwise. And we do not, even when we encourage enough recycling, we still can't walk beyond a city limit and say, hey, you really need to do this inside the city. So I think this is something we need to work on alongside with the municipalities as we do an educational and encouragement campaign, so to speak. we have to have some buy-in, because 43% of the waste coming through the transfer station is coming through the municipalities. 11% only comes from the main convenience centers. So even if we control 100% of our 11%, that's still only 11%.
Any other comments? I have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.